Greiner Talks about sustainability and transformation. A Greiner podcast episode.
How to change, how to create a sustainable future. That's what we're discussing here. My name is Alexander. I'm part of the sustainability team at Greiner, and in this episode, I'll speak to one of the most influential people in business ethics. She's the director of the New York University's Center for Sustainable Business. She's the former president of the renowned Rainforest Alliance. And as a professor and advisor, she's working tirelessly to change outdated management practices. Welcome, Tensie Whelan.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Tensie, you seem to be a rather busy person. Is our conversation today taking place in between classes and research?
Yes, absolutely. I actually taught at 7:30 this morning, and I'm teaching later today, and I'm working on a research proposal that I am engaging with too. So yes, but I'm glad to talk to you regardless.
And what of these aspects is your favorite part of your job? Is it teaching? Is it research?
I really love everything. I love engaging with young people and helping them, not only young people, actually, I do a lot of education with executives, but helping people see that aha moment of where they begin to embrace sustainability. And then as a former journalist, I love asking questions and love figuring out how to solve for particular challenges through research and through practical tools that practitioners can use to improve their sustainability performance.
And speaking of young people, speaking of university, now you are heading the NYU's Center for Sustainable Business. And I got lots of questions around that, but I'd like to start with a very basic question. What makes a business a sustainable business? Aren't all of our activities somehow connected with a footprint?
So my belief is that a sustainable business is one that aims for a net positive impact on societal issues, environmental and social issues, while also making a profit. You cannot be a sustainable business if you're not profitable, but I also believe increasingly we're saying you cannot be a sustainable business and profitable if you don't take care of your people, of local communities, if you don't manage for the challenges we have around climate change, water scarcity, waste generation, etc. So bringing that all together, embedding it into your business strategy rather than treating it as a separate corporate social responsibility exercise will help you deliver more value financially and to your stakeholders.
So it's about connecting all the dots.
Correct.
The Center for Sustainable Business helps corporate leaders to create a sustainable future. Now I'd like to know, what kind of mindset do the leaders of the future need?
I think the vision that leaders of the future need is first to understand that they rely on both creating value for a variety of different stakeholders, not just shareholders. Their future depends on that. And that their future depends on ensuring that we're protecting the natural environment upon which a lot of our business is based. So that means they need to, one, understand the material opportunities as well as risks that issues like climate change and water scarcity and biodiversity and diversity, equity, and inclusion and inequality provide for business. And that requires a different mindset. But they need to think about it not as a philanthropic endeavor, but as something that is part of their business strategy. And secondly, in terms of the stakeholder piece, that rather than thinking about generating value solely for shareholders, that in order to actually deliver value for shareholders, they need to have engaged and productive employees. They need to have satisfied customers. They need to have suppliers who are resilient and want to supply to that company. They need to have nonprofit organizations that believe that this company is trying to do its best from a sustainability perspective. So there's a variety of different stakeholders. Investors would be another one, working with investors who care about sustainability issues, and increasingly they're being regulated into caring about them. So all of this means that the ability, the skill set to understand these issues, embed them in corporate strategy, and to think about it from an opportunity mindset, not just a risk mindset, and finally, to create those abilities to create win-win situations or solutions for stakeholders rather than a top-down, we're going to do what we're going to do approach. All of that requires new skills and new ways of thinking.
And when you're looking at your students at the New York University, what trends, what developments do you see in their approach to business? Is that different compared to 10, 15 years ago?
Yeah, I would say students today, and I teach undergraduates, MBAs, executive MBAs, and executives, right? So across every age group. They are clearer and clearer that these are existential issues for business that can create paralysis, right? So sometimes you see people really not knowing what to do about it and deciding to ignore it because they just feel it's overwhelming. It can also unlock enthusiasm and innovation and excitement and commitment and purpose. So I see that in my students as well. I also see that they personally, particularly the younger students, believe that behaving in a sustainable way is critical and that they only want to work for companies that share those values, and they only want to buy from companies that share those values, and they only want to invest in companies that share those values. So I think that focus is becoming more and more an opportunity as well as a risk for companies who don't understand that shift.
And that's very closely connected to what you mentioned earlier. It's about profitability and sustainability, that it only goes together. So I'd like to speak about success and about new ways of thinking, because in common understanding, a successful business is still a business that is primarily financially profitable. I think that environmental aspects, social aspects, they play a minor role. Do we need to redefine that kind of success that we understand?
Absolutely. What I am seeing is that not understanding and taking care of environmental and social issues actually drives poor financial performance, and the converse drives better financial performance. So through the work that we do with our return on sustainability investment methodology, we've looked at things like, for one automotive company, their waste management strategies are driving $235 million net of annual contribution to EBIT, which they did not know because they weren't looking at the fact that they were driving a lot of cost savings as well as new revenue opportunities. So, for example, one practice they put in place was to recycle paint and solvent. When you recycle paint and solvent, you no longer buy the virgin stuff, you no longer have the waste disposal costs, and actually they had some left over that they were selling. There's an entirely positive financial implication associated with that. And we've seen that. I know we'll talk more about this, but we have a lot of other examples in a variety of different ways where companies are driving better financial performance through embedding sustainability core to business strategy.
You have already mentioned it, return on sustainable investment. That's a methodology that you and your colleagues at the NYU are developing. Could you explain in very simple terms, how can I understand that? What is it about?
Yeah. So when a company really embeds sustainability into their corporate strategy, so again, it's not a separate strategy, it's part of their main strategy, it can drive more operational efficiencies like the one I just described. It can drive innovation and growth. It can drive employee engagement and retention. It can drive better media coverage. It can drive more resiliency and loyalty amongst your suppliers. Of course, it can drive sales and marketing and customer loyalty benefits. It can drive better risk mitigation, right? So there's a series of different factors that when you embed sustainability, you can drive better performance. We then we've worked with automotive, apparel, let's say food and agriculture, pharmaceuticals, utilities, private equity firms to test out this methodology and learn from it. And again, in virtually every case, we're finding benefits. As an example, if you have a company that's really focused on purpose and sustainability, your retention and productivity goes up. You can compare that to a company, an average company who doesn't have that, and understand their retention and productivity numbers and see how you benefit and monetize that as one example.
Now I'd like to ask a naive question. If I look at stock markets and stock prices, the only figures I see is prices in terms of financial figures. Does that have to change? Will that be carbon emissions in the future? Will that be sustainability performance or other KPIs that we will see?
Yeah, so I think the challenge is more that we don't use stock price as the primary element or metric to which we manage or that we compensate is really critical. And we're already beginning to see that companies' leadership are rewarding additional KPIs beyond the financial metrics. Also, we need to recognize that managing to stock price is not the same as managing to the benefit of the company, right? So we need to say, all right, what is going to drive better financial performance over the medium and long term for the company? Well, one is investing in our employees and have employees who know what they're doing and keeping them so that we don't lose them once we've trained them well. What else do we need to understand in that perspective? We need to understand what natural resources we're dependent on and how much water and carbon are embedded in those, because increasingly we're going to have to pay fees on those. We're going to actually be not able to access water. We may have license to operate issues. So we need to build into our plans how we're going to reduce our exposure to those problematic issues. And then we need to put in place KPIs to track them. So I do think that it's going to be essential that each company understands the material issues upon which its business depends, as well as upon which it creates major impact, and be able to report those alongside the financials, but also more importantly, or just as importantly, be able to track how the two are related. Because right now we see ESG metric reporting and financial reporting and not how the two are related, which then creates real challenges around understanding strategically and from a decision-making perspective where we should be investing more.
Now, I've had a look at the website of the NYU Center for Sustainable Business, and there's quite a lot of interesting research papers also with your participation. I'd like to know, is there any outcome from your research that you're really surprised of, that surprised yourself?
I've been fascinated by the fact that every single case we look into, we find financial benefit of sustainability. And really what I'm seeing is that sustainability is the next wave of total quality management, right? Any kind of good management can drive operational efficiency or innovation or employee retention. It's not just sustainability, right? Or risk mitigation. But what's fascinating about embedding sustainability into your strategy, putting in place good practices around it, is that it often, one practice may drive 3 or 4 of those benefits. So I think the aha moment for me is that sustainability is about better management. And that's the kind of focus we have in our research, is to help companies understand that and be able to embrace that in the same way that they've embraced, let's say, digitalization as an important element of better management for the company. Sustainability is that as well.
And the link between sustainability and between finance is incredibly important, as we have already learned in that conversation. At the same time, it's a link that is quite difficult at times. I'm just thinking of a recent meeting where it was discussed whether we could invest in a certain sustainability project or not, given the current economic situation. So often investing in a sustainability project is linked to the financial performance. How do you deal with that situation?
Well, because companies aren't looking at the full, they're not looking at the cost of inaction. So what happens if you don't make that investment from a financial perspective? And secondly, they're not looking at the full range of benefits that might accrue if you take that action. So it's a challenge that companies just aren't sufficiently sophisticated about making these types of evaluations.
And you can have similar situations on the customer side. So for example, in the plastic sector, sustainable products that are made from recycled plastics are, as of today, often more expensive than conventional ones. So what if customers want sustainability, but they are not willing to pay the full price for it?
Right. So this is something I was very interested, because when I was running Rainforest Alliance, I heard from CMOs that they were saying that, there's a green gap. People say they want to buy the product, but they don't, or if they're willing to buy it, they won't pay a premium. So when I came to Stern, I said, okay, where's the research on this? And in fact, what I found was that all the research was on surveys. Survey whether you said you were going to buy and survey whether you actually bought, which is notoriously unreliable, right? So then we partnered with a company called IRI, which collects all of our barcode data in the United States at retail, from mom and pop shops to Target and Amazon, from bricks and mortar to e-commerce. And we've looked at this since 2019. In 2019, we looked 5 years back. So we've been looking every year since. And what we found is that sustainability marketed products are growing 3 times faster than conventional products at a 28% premium on average, which ranges across the categories, right? We've seen the emergence of carbon labeled products. So in 2021, $3.4 billion of carbon labeled products sold in America, up from $1.3 billion the year before, up from 0 the year before that. We also saw in 2021, 1 out of every 2 new products sold in consumer packaged goods in the United States had sustainability attributes. So this whole kind of conversation that people don't want to pay and that sustainability is not important, actually, the real live data tells a very, very different story. And we've also just looked at it most recently through this inflationary period. And we're still seeing that customers are far less sensitive to price on sustainable products than they are in conventional products.
Tensie, you have mentioned the Rainforest Alliance briefly in your answer, and I'd like to know a little bit more about that because I think it's a very exciting organization. So before joining the New York University, you were leading the Rainforest Alliance for more than 15 years. Could you tell me in a nutshell, what is the Rainforest Alliance all about?
Sure. I love the organization. So the Rainforest Alliance focuses on helping to transform business behavior, consumer behavior, and land use practices through using markets, right? So in effect, we work with companies to help them with sustainable sourcing of agriculture, forestry products. And so we have now worked with 20% of the world's tea with companies like Lipton and Tetley's and Twinings, with forest products, with companies like IKEA and others, and then working with the communities to help them improve their practices. And what we've seen, again, and this is one of the reasons why I got interested in this when I came to NYU, is that there are really significant financial benefits to everybody in the value chain for more sustainable practices. Obviously for the farmers and the communities and the foresters, but also for everybody in the value chain, the intermediaries up to the brands and then to the consumers. The organization is working in 60 countries around the world with more than 5,000 companies and more than 5 million small producers. So really working at scale to transform our consumption and production processes.
And I'd like to know, you hold a lot of experience in the private sector, with nonprofits, in academia. In which area do you feel personally that you can make the most impact?
The reason why I'm working at the nexus of all 3 is because that's where I feel I can make the most impact, right? I did, when you're in the academic and sort of NGO space, you're a force multiplier, you're a catalyst. You work with business to transform what they do. So if I get to one company, I can only work to improve that one company. From an NGO perspective at Rainforest Alliance, I not only worked with, or my organization worked with thousands of companies, millions of producers. So really the scale of our catalytic work. And academia, it's the scale of training and reaching thousands of people in their careers to help them be able to take on in a positive way these issues, as well as developing the research that companies will go use. And again, that force multiplier approach. So for me, it's exciting to be at the nexus.
And now that you are at this nexus, you have a lot of insight into different areas. At the same time, there's so many negative headlines about the climate crisis, about biodiversity, etc. What's your personal outlook on the future of sustainability? Do you think we're going to make it?
Well, I was raised to be a person who takes a glass half full approach. I have to in my work. I am really concerned that from a climate change perspective, we are not on the trajectory that we need to be on. And the impacts are here or are going to get worse. So I am negative and very concerned and depressed about that. On the other hand, I see, and I saw this when I was running Rainforest Alliance in every corner of the world, and I'm seeing it still in academia, is that everywhere you look, there are individuals, governments, and businesses, investors really committed to change and experimenting and working on practices that improve sustainability socially and environmentally. And so there's a lot to be inspired by. We actually have a lot of what we need to make the changes, not everything. And we can't also think about this only as a technological solution, but there is also growing availability of a variety of different technologies that are going to help, that are helping. But it's also about changing mindsets, individual and corporate. And that's, I think, big challenge as well, because people don't like change, right? So this is a change management exercise. We will either be forced into radical change overnight due to crisis, or we can manage it hopefully a little more systematically and systemically. We're not going to avoid some of the worst of this, and that's where I am pessimistic. But I am always, every day, inspired by the great work people are doing.
Tensie, I'd like to ask many more questions, but we are slowly coming to an end of the conversation, so I'd love to invite you to do a short word wrap with me, if that's fine for you.
Okay.
So I will give you a few words or a few terms, and you can reply with whatever comes to your mind. That can be just one word or even a short story.
Okay.
First one, rainforest.
Beauty.
Impact.
Difficult.
Money.
We all need it.
Coffee.
Farmers, forests, birds, taste.
Newspapers.
Information.
Biodiversity.
Necessary.
And last but not least, your message to the world.
Be optimistic, act now, incorporate sustainability into your own lives, but also into your work life, and don't be afraid to engage others in that conversation. We need as many people as possible moving this forward in order to ensure that our children and our grandchildren can have a world that we've been able to enjoy.
Thank you so much for that optimistic ending and for this insightful conversation, Tensie.
You're so welcome. It's been a pleasure.
And thank you everybody for listening. I learned a lot of new things and I hope you did too. Check out Tensie Whelan's talks on YouTube, subscribe to this podcast, and have a lovely day.
Greiner Talks, a Greiner podcast. Subscribe now.